How are you feeling about this new upcoming school year? Would you say you feel hopeful about it? Now, it's really important to be hopeful about the upcoming school year, but it's not enough to just hope that your child will have a better school year or hope that your client will have a better school year. But hope matters. And today our guest is going to talk about the science of hope and what that means for a new school year. I'm excited that you're here today, and I'm excited about our guest. She is an expert in hope and a certified psychological health and safety advisor. My guest today is Lindsay Recknell. She works with individuals and organizations to increase their levels of psychological health and safety in the workplace using positive psychology and the science of hope. She empowers individuals, strengthens teams, and transforms organizations through her self-awareness superhero, dream catalyst, and wellness webinars. Lindsay lives in Calgary. She's a fellow Canadian, and she lives with her husband and their 2 golden retrievers, and she is here with us today. You don't want to miss this episode.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Karen. It is so awesome to be here.
I am so glad that you're here. And I knew that you would bring the energy, which is why I'm so glad that you're here.
I mean, I don't know any other way to be. So here we are.
It is just, we're recording in summer, but it's like this transition period to a new academic year for kids who are in school. Parents are, transitioning from vacations back to work. And so it's a good time.
It is a really good time. I like this time of year the best. You know how some people make their New Year's resolutions on New Year's? I make mine in September because, it's like, I don't know, it just feels like a brand new season and there's so much potential and hopefulness at this time of year.
I agree. And, here at the Diverse Thinking, Different Learning podcast, we talk about how to support kids who think and learn differently, kids who've been diagnosed with a neurodevelopmental disorder, those with mental health challenges, and we are preparing for a new school year. And maybe even at the time that this publishes, school year may have already started for some. And I wanted to have you on the podcast because some kids really struggled last year and parents watched their kids struggle. And maybe this year parents didn't get the teacher they wanted for their child for the upcoming school year or the accommodations they wanted for the school. But I really believe it's important as we begin a new school year to be hopeful. And that's why I wanted to have you here.
Well, I could talk about hope as long as you'd like.
I do want you to talk about hope, but I don't want it to just be this kind of abstract thing we talk about because there is a science behind hope, which is why I wanted you here. And I would love for you to talk to our listeners about the science of hope. And then we can talk about how we can apply it to their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the game changer for me. I really think that hope has a PR problem and I aim to solve it because when we think about this, I don't know, when we think about the word hope, it feels intangible. It feels fluffy or cosmic woo-woo. And we all recognize that word, right? We recognize what it feels like intuitively in our body, that bubbly sort of anticipatory feeling. And I recognized that I got my hope back the day I recognized was the same day I recognized that I'd lost it to begin with. And I don't know if that's something that resonates with you or with your listeners, but we go through the motions, right? We put on pants, we go get groceries, we take our kids to school, and we go through those emotions. But I recognized that I had lost that zest for the future. I'd lost that ambition to do anything beyond the basics. And that was okay. It's just not how I typically operate. And so my deal is I learn, I figure out what's going on and how to fix it and how to prevent it from happening. And that's where I found the science of positive psychology. And within positive psychology is the field of study called the science of hope. And I learned this and I felt so validated. Like, what? There's over 2,000 research studies to support the power of hope and how it works in our brain. There's evidence to support what we intuitively know. I mean, amazing, amazing. And so I just set out to learn everything I could about the science of hope. And if your listeners aren't familiar with positive psychology, it's like the antithesis to traditional psychology. If traditional psychology is the science of decreasing sadness, positive psychology is about increasing wellness. So instead of going from negative to neutral, we're starting at neutral and we're going to flourishing. And the positive psychology was founded back in the late 90s by a gentleman called Dr. Martin Seligman out of the University of Pennsylvania. And he was the president of the American I always get this word wrong, Psychology Association, the APA. And he made positive psychology his legacy. It was what he wanted to focus on during his presidency. And when you focus and you've got this much passion around it, naturally, sort of proteges start to emerge out of this work. And two proteges of Dr. Seligman's that really resonated with me, a gentleman called Dr. Rick Snyder and another gentleman, the late Dr. Shane Lopez. And I mentioned those two fine folks because I use a lot of their work. I reference a lot of their work in my work. And especially Dr. Snyder, who came up with the concept called hope theory. And hope theory is goals plus agency thinking plus pathways thinking. And that's where the action of hope comes in. So we can talk about that in a little bit, but that's where the action of hope comes in. And it also where something called the hope circuit was kind of born, which is essentially the limbic system, parts of the limbic system. And the hope circuit sort of demonstrates how hope can work in the brain and how we can actually leverage the science of hope to create a future better than today.
And I just love that because I think, when we really take a concept like hope and we realize that there's a science to support it, then we really can embrace the impact it can have on our lives. Because understanding the science of hope, when we understand that, it tells us about our humanity. It tells us about our innate ability to overcome tough things. And when we can do that, we can pass that knowledge on to our children.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a concept that, conceptually feels quite simple to grasp. So it does have universal application because it's not super, super complicated. For sure, the deeper you go, the more complicated it gets, but conceptually, we can all leverage it because it is a reasonably simple concept to grasp.
And so hope, can it be taught?
Oh,
yes. You talked about how you kind of lost your hope. So people who might be saying, I'm ruminating a lot on what happened last academic year with my kids, maybe the year before. I'm kind of stuck and I'm struggling to have a positive mindset about what the future holds. Tell me about being in that space and what we can do.
Yeah, so I don't believe that hope is ever totally gone or missing. I think we all have hope, even if it's deep down and the light is dim. We are all, I would think the hope scale. So there is an actual scientifically validated test called the hope scale, also created by Dr. Snyder. And you can measure your levels of hope and then you can measure it again after taking some action to increase your hope and see where you've moved on that scale. And so if we think about where we are in our hope, there are absolutely some things that we can do to increase hope. And I believe hope is contagious. So if the only powers you have over your decision-making, over your action is to find someone who's really hopeful, go hang out with them, go call them, text them, just get into their world, get into their energy and borrow some of their hope. It's a renewable resource. And so if there's someone that is feeling more hopeful than you, go hang out with them and borrow some of theirs. And then later, you can reciprocate. When you're feeling more hopeful, you can, pay that forward and share your hope with somebody else. That's a real easy one. I'm sure you're all thinking of hopeful people that you know in your life. So just go start there. Go connect with those fine folks. And then independently, you can grow your hope through connecting to your agency, which is your internal intrinsic motivation for things. And we can talk about that in more detail as part of hope theory. And then pathways thinking is the third part of hope theory, which is taking action over some of the things you can control. Absolutely, barriers and obstacles are going to get in the way. And you're going to feel like you're banging your head against that proverbial wall. But if I use the analogy of driving in a car and you coming to a T intersection, you're not just going to get out of your car and go, well, guess there's nowhere to go from here, right? You're going to turn left, or you're going to turn right, or you're going to turn around and go the other direction. There's always other options. Some awesome, some not so awesome, but there's always going to be something else to try. And so that is the pathways thinking, is overcoming those obstacles and barriers that are absolutely going to get in the way.
I'd love for you to talk to me a little bit more about that intrinsic aspect, because I think that is so important, because a lot of hopefulness and our thoughts about being hopeful really is internal.
Can I go back a little bit further and talk about the hope circuit? Because the hope circuit and how it works in the limbic system connects to that intrinsic motivation. So I want to do a little thought experiment with your listeners here. So if we think about the hope circuit, what I call the hope circuit, it starts in the part of the limbic system in our brain called the hippocampus. And this is where memories are made. This is where all of our hopes and dreams are made. And the beauty of the brain is the hippocampus really can't distinguish fake memories from real ones. And so when we create goals, when we aim for dreams, even if we just start to think about them and talk about them, that's happening in the hippocampus, and it's already giving us a bonus. It's already starting to increase our hope. So from the hippocampus, which you can remember like an elephant, because it's kind of designed, it kind of looks like an elephant's trunk, but also an elephant never forgets. And that's where your memories are stored, right? So you take those memories, those fake or real memories, and they travel next to the amygdala. And the amygdala is kind of like your guard dog. This is where fight, flight, or freeze happens. So it takes your dreams that you've now put into the amygdala, and it decides what's good for you, what's not so good for you, what you should follow, what you should not follow. Sometimes you'll listen and sometimes you won't, but your guard dog is there to protect you and figure out what you should do with these hopes and dreams. So once you've decided that, yep, there's one, I want to do it, it's good, we want to take action on that. And so that's where it goes to the third and last spot in the hope circuit, which is your prefrontal cortex, your PFC. And I like to refer to your PFC as your wise old owl. This is like your command center. This is your project manager, your coordination. It tells you what you need to do first and next along the path of that journey to accomplish that dream or achieve that goal. It decides what's on critical path. And this is where the pathways thinking happens as well, because you're going to run into stuff and then your PFC goes, okay, what's next? Where do I got to go? How do I got to adjust? That kind of thing. And so that's where the hope happens, is in that limbic system. And so if we do a little thought experiment, if we just take a few minutes and do a little thought experiment to connect to our agency, connect to that intrinsic motivation. Everybody who's listening, I'd like you to take a few seconds, a few minutes, and write down a couple of things you'd like to be, see, do, or have. Anything at all. Blue sky. There are no limits here. There is no financial obligations. There are no people obligations. There are no job or, career obligations. This is things you want to be, see, do, or have, with no limits, blue sky. I also want you to be a bit selfless here. Think about what's important to you, what you want to do because it's what you want to do. We know that we can't take care of other people until we get to take care of ourselves. And we forget that a lot. And we are natural caregivers. We want to, be there for our kids and put our kids in priority. But in this particular instance, you get to do for you. Think about what you want to do, be, see, or have. And then I'd like you to pick one of those things, the one that you really, really, really want to accomplish. And imagine what it looks like when you've achieved that thing, when you've done that thing, when you've gone to that place. Who's there with you? What does it look like there? What does it feel like in that moment? What might it smell like there? Really engage in that vision of what it looks like. What opportunities might accomplishment of this thing open up for you? I mean, obviously, I don't know what dreams you're thinking about. Obviously, I don't know what it looks like or feels like in that moment. But I imagine that there's people around you that you love. Maybe there's people that are proud of you. Or maybe there's a sense of pride and accomplishment for doing this thing, from working this hard to get to this place. And maybe this thing has given you some sort of freedom. Maybe it's financial freedom or, a sense of awe or excitement for the future. That's your brain on hope. You haven't even done this thing yet. And I can imagine that you are feeling so much more hopeful simply from going through this visioning exercise, because those memories are working in the hippocampus. And then you've gone through to, okay, how this is good for me. How am I going to accomplish it in the amygdala? And then your PFC says, cool, this is what it looks like and feels like when it's done. We've coordinated, we've accomplished all the things. And you are in a place where you are already feeling more hopeful towards that future better than today. And so for parents, that was a long-winded way of saying for parents, if you can start from that place and do that exercise with your family, by yourself, over and over, when you just need that little hope booster, it's going to be so, so powerful. And it was so simple. What did it take us? 10 minutes?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful how you made that connection, because someone is actually imagining what they're envisioning for their lives, for their experience. And then when you connect it with the amygdala, you get that emotion, you get that happiness about what it is that you're anticipating or what it is that you're dreaming about, like you said. And then you actually have the ability to kind of think about, well, how can I make this happen? Or how can I work towards this goal? And it sounds like there's a certain amount of goal setting that's involved in that hope theory, is it not?
That's the first part. Hope theory is goals plus agency thinking plus pathways thinking. So once you know kind of what you want to do or where you want to go or what you want to achieve, then you attach to the agency, which is your intrinsic motivation, your desire to do the thing, because it's going to get hard, right? We're going to hit those brick walls. And so if we can connect back to our why, our intrinsic motivation, that gives us the energy and the gumption and the grit, if you will, to continue along that hope circuit to get to overcome that, use our pathways thinking to overcome some of those obstacles.
And I think it's important for people who are listening to know that, hopefulness is not only about feeling happy or feeling good. Hopefulness is actually tied to our overall well-being, right?
Yeah. People always ask me, is hope the same as optimism? And the science or the researchers don't all agree, as in most cases. But in my belief, in what I've read and what I believe to understand, is that hope and optimism are related, but not dependent on each other. So if you think of someone who's optimistic, they maybe have some blind faith that it's just going to work out, that it's going to be fine, that, it's all going to work out in the end, and that's cool. Hopeful people also have that idea that the future will be better than today, but they're going to take action over some of the things they can control to get to that place. I think of optimistic people who want to win the lotto, just wishing to win the lotto. And hopeful people are going to go and buy a ticket.
I love that. And I think that action piece is so important.
My definition of hope is that the future will be better than today by taking action over the things we can control. And the 3 keywords in there for me are future, action, and control.
And I know the actions will be very individualized for each person. But if people are thinking about, this is where I kind of want to lean in as I begin this new academic year for my kids or transitioning back to work from vacation, what are some action items that would be important for our listeners? You talked about borrowing hope, aligning yourself with people who are hopeful. What are some other things that people can do to build hope?
Yeah. So if we think specifically about the scenario of a parent wanting something better for their child for the school year, and maybe that's, I'm just going to use a scenario. Maybe that is moving your child to a different classroom. I don't know. And maybe that feels impossible. And there's a lot of effort involved there and a lot of steps, and you're really not sure even where to start. Something that works really well for some people, and keep in mind that anything I suggest, you got to try it and see if it works for you. These are not, you have to do these things. This is the only way it's going to work. No. We get to try, and then we see if it works. And if it doesn't work, we try something different. So one of the things that you could try is literally, Rachel Hollis calls it alphabet soup, where you literally write down every thought, every step, every overwhelm, all the things you could possibly think about to accomplish that you think is going to take to accomplish this problem. So you blurt it out on a page, you free write, you take notes, you sit in a quiet space for an hour, and you just write all of the things. Because often fear is louder in the dark. And so if we get it out of our heads and onto paper, we can start to make sense of it, right? It's not so conceptual anymore. Now it's tangible. And once it's on paper, you can start to prioritize it or reorganize it or think, okay, I need to, get a meeting with the principal. What have I got to do before that? I got to get their phone number, like simple. So then we break down all these big things into the most granular, the most micro level of detail that we possibly can. It might feel ridiculous to write Google principal's teacher on the paper. But if you get down to that level of granularity, on those days where you can't fathom doing something big, you can do something small like Google the phone number. Mm-hmm. Nobody says you have to take big steps every time. You can get down to that most granular level. And when you can do that small thing, your brain goes, oh, I did that. I can do the next little thing. And your confidence starts to build just simply over those small activities. It's like, if you don't think you can get out of bed today, start by wiggling your toes. Honestly, get to that smallest point. Start by wiggling your toes. And once you can wiggle your toes, maybe you knock your knees. And once you knock your knees, maybe you start to wiggle your hips. And eventually your feet are on the floor and you're making your coffee or having your shower. But it can start with wiggling your toes, that basic small stuff.
And when you talk about hope being something that can be taught, and I'm listening to you talk about wiggling your toes, and I'm thinking about that child who doesn't want to get up in the morning because school is so awful. That is something you can teach your child. Let's just wiggle our toes. And then we'll go on to the next step. Let's just go have breakfast, right? Let's get in the car, right?
It's actually the progress along the path to the goal. So if getting kids to school is the goal, it's actually the progress along the path that makes all the difference. It's not actually accomplishing the thing. Science says that it's the progress, it's the sharing of community, it's sharing the progress with other people, having that joint experience with your child is exponentially better and more awesome and more powerful in your body than even the act of getting to school. Builds confidence and joy and connection.
Absolutely. And if I think about even a child who may have had a rough day, and you can apply that same concept, that same theory to, well, what can we do tomorrow, to make tomorrow different than your experience today? And it doesn't have to be something grand that makes this the best day this child has ever had. It can be something small, like you said.
Maybe we put on our lucky socks.
Yes.
Maybe we pick out our favorite color t-shirt.
Absolutely. This is so important. I think that hope is such an important topic, especially given the last 2.5 years where people lost a lot of hope and saw a lot of difficult things and had a lot of difficult experiences. There's never been a greater time to have hope.
Yeah. And I think, people say to me, life is hard. Yeah, it totally is. And it's not going to get easy. So using a tool like some of the things that we've just talked about can just help to build our resilience as we're going through these tough times. It's clearly not rosy, sunshiny rainbows and puppy dogs all the time. We know the reality of life is that we're going to go through tough times. So if we can leverage tools like this to help us to build resiliency, to just make it a little bit easier, why would we not do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Lindsay. This is so timely and so helpful and so hopeful, right? Which is what we want. If our listeners want to get in touch with you and learn more about your work, how do they do that?
You bet. So I'm on the good old interwebs at expertinhope.com, or you can just Google my name. I have an awesome name that is easy to say, but nobody else has it. So you can Google it and you will find all the work I do with Science of Hope, Positive Psychology. I also have a podcast called Hope Motivates Action. And it is where I just get to meet cool people going through transformation or helping others through transformation, taking action on their hope to get them through tough times. It's like my favorite thing I do.
Wonderful. And we will put a link to that in the show notes. And if we think about what you just said about doing one small thing, subscribing to your podcast would be that one thing that they could do.
Yeah,
after
it absolutely
to this
can.
Podcast.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here, Lindsay. I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing in this space.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know that I really enjoyed my conversation with Lindsay. I hope you walk away having a better understanding about the science of hope. I hope that you realize that hope can be taught and you can also borrow it. You can borrow hope. So here's hoping for a great school year. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.